Imagine waking up tomorrow. Your phone doesn't turn on. Not because the battery died, because every phone on Earth stopped working at once. By noon, commercial flights are grounded. Not from weather, not from terrorism. The air traffic control systems that guide 40,000 flights a day have gone dark. By evening, hospitals are running out of ventilators, insulin pumps, dialysis machines. ICUs that were never designed to function without automated systems are failing in silence. By the end of the week, the global banking network is frozen. Supply chains have stopped moving. The most powerful militaries in human history are completely blind. This isn't science fiction. This is a documented economic projection of what happens if one specific supply chain stops moving for just a few weeks. Most people think semiconductors are about iPhones and gaming consoles. They are not. Semiconductors are the nervous system of modern civilization. They run the water grids, the banking networks, the logistics pipelines, the autonomous vehicles, the hypersonic missiles. We built the most advanced civilization in human history, and we accidentally placed the entire weight of it on top of one single, fragile bottleneck. And the terrifying part isn't just that modern life depends entirely on this bottleneck. It's where this bottleneck is located and who is currently threatening to choke it. Chapter 1: The Accidental Monopoly. We were told globalization was the great equalizer, that when the world connected, production would spread, resilience would grow, and no single point of failure would ever be allowed to exist. That story was a lie. When it comes to the technology that now defines civilizational power, production didn't spread. It concentrated down to a handful of buildings on a small island 25 miles off the coast of China. Here's how absurd this actually is. To build one advanced semiconductor, one chip, you need ultraviolet lasers engineered in California, precision optical mirrors manufactured in Germany, chemicals synthesized in Japan. All of it assembled into one machine by one company in the Netherlands, ASML, a machine so complex that only a handful exist on the entire planet, a machine that costs more than $200 million per unit, a machine that no single government fully understands how to rebuild from scratch. And then every one of those machines gets shipped to Taiwan, where one company, TSMC, turns raw silicon into the most precisely engineered objects in human history. This is the most complex, expensive, interconnected manufacturing process our species has ever constructed, and it requires one extraordinary condition to function: absolute, uninterrupted global peace. But global peace is quietly ending, and the very island that holds the keys to the 21st century has become the most dangerous geopolitical fault line on Earth. Chapter 2: The Geography of Fear. Taiwan, a democratic island of 23 million people, and the single most strategically important piece of land on the planet. TSMC alone manufactures over 90% of the world's most advanced chips. Not 51%, not 70%, 90%. China's position has never been ambiguous. Taiwan belongs to them, always has, always will. And in recent years, the military encirclement has dramatically intensified. Naval drills in the Strait, missile tests, coordinated airspace violations, not warnings, rehearsals. Taiwan saw this threat coming decades ago, so they made a calculated, ruthless decision. They would embed themselves so deeply into the infrastructure of the global economy that attacking them would be economically suicidal for everyone, including China. They called it, informally, the Silicon Shield. The logic is brutal and elegant. If you invade Taiwan, you don't just hurt the West, you collapse Chinese manufacturing. You trigger a global depression that makes 2008 look like a minor correction. You don't just lose a war, you lose your entire economy. Mutually assured economic destruction. And for decades, it held. But Washington looked at the map. They looked at the military confidence of Beijing. They looked at the narrowing window of technological advantage, and they decided they were no longer willing to leave the future of civilization to the fragile logic of mutual destruction. So they quietly launched a new kind of war, one not fought with missiles, with regulations. Chapter 3: The Weaponization of Sand. To understand why the United States moved so aggressively, you have to understand what the real prize actually is. This was never about laptops. This was never really about smartphones. This is about artificial intelligence, and it's about who controls the next generation of military power. Because the most advanced AI systems, the ones that will redefine intelligence, surveillance, logistics, and autonomous warfare, run entirely on advanced semiconductors. Whoever leads in chips leads in AI. Whoever leads in AI leads in the 21st century. In October 2022, the United States dropped the most consequential economic weapon in modern history, a sweeping set of export controls targeting the Chinese semiconductor industry. The message was cold and precise. You cannot buy our most advanced chips, you cannot buy the machines that manufacture them, and no American citizen can work for your chip companies, not as an engineer, not as an advisor, not in any capacity whatsoever. Overnight, the United States attempted to freeze Chinese technological progress in its tracks, not by bombing a factory, by severing the invisible technical workforce and supply lines that make those factories possible in the first place. China is not folding. They have begun aggressively weaponizing the raw materials the rest of the world needs to build chips: gallium, germanium, rare earth elements, resources where China controls the majority of global supply. The counterattack has already begun. But here's what the architects of this strategy didn't fully account for. When you cut off a superpower, you force them to build their own independent system, and you force yourself into a trillion-dollar panic to rebuild yours.
Chapter 4: The Trillion-Dollar Panic. The CHIPS Act, $52 billion. America's emergency response to 3 decades of quiet manufacturing offshoring. Europe followed with its own CHIPS Act. Japan, South Korea, India. Hundreds of billions of dollars suddenly mobilized to rebuild domestic semiconductor capacity. On paper, it sounds like a solution. On the ground, it is a humbling collision with reality. You cannot simply copy-paste a TSMC factory. Building advanced semiconductor manufacturing requires ultra-pure water systems so precise that a single molecular contaminant destroys an entire production run. It requires an engineering workforce that took Taiwan 40 years to cultivate. It requires an institutional culture of manufacturing discipline that no amount of government subsidy can create overnight. The first Intel fab funded under the CHIPS Act ran years behind schedule. TSMC's own Arizona plant faced immediate labor shortages the moment it tried to transfer its processes to American soil. And here's the brutal arithmetic no one wants to say out loud. These factories take a decade to reach full capacity. The geopolitical clock is not waiting a decade. What we are watching in real time is the fracturing of a single unified global supply chain. The world is splitting into 2 parallel technology ecosystems, one centered on Washington, one centered in Beijing, 2 internets, 2 chip standards, 2 technological civilizations diverging in real time. The era of frictionless global interdependence is over. We just haven't fully felt it yet. Which leaves us standing at the edge of something far larger, something that goes well beyond trade policy and manufacturing subsidies.
Final escalation, the civilization problem. For centuries, the world's empires fought wars for access to deep water ports. Control the harbor, control the trade, control the trade, control the empire. In the 20th century, nations rewrote their borders over oil fields. Control the oil, control the industrial capacity, control the century. Today, the absolute ceiling of a nation's economic and military power is measured in nanometers. The semiconductor war is not a trade dispute. It is not a technology race. It is not even a Cold War. It is something we don't yet have a proper name for, a desperate civilizational battle for the operating system of the 21st century. The supply chain is still running, the ships are still moving, the chips are still flowing. But beneath the surface, the invisible architecture holding our world together has never been more fragile. Every government knows it, every defense ministry knows it, every major technology company knows it. They are all quietly preparing for a world where the bottleneck finally breaks. The question isn't whether this crisis will reshape civilization, it already is. The question is whether the world manages that reshaping or is consumed by it. Because the superpower that controls the microchip doesn't just control the market, it controls tomorrow. To understand the hidden forces shaping our world, make sure you're part of the flow. Subscribe to FactoraFlow.